Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson. Today, I am excited about this podcast. One of, something that made me really happy about the Masters was our creative director, I guess that could be his title, Cameron Hurdus, won the media lottery to play Augusta National. Cameron's been with us for a few years now and is really responsible for making our long form videos on YouTube, the designs you see on a lot of our merchandise is Cameron's work. And he is a very, very talented creative, and he's also a golf architecture nut. Cameron's won the Lido competition, the Alistair Mackenzie Society Lido competition. He's won that 3 times in his young life. He's actually banned from the competition now, which is kind of a bummer for him. So he's been very into golf architecture since a young age. And for him to get the chance to play Augusta National the Monday after the Masters was really cool. So he joins to chat about his experience, his thoughts on playing the golf course for the first part of this podcast. And then the second half, I'm joined by Brian Schneider, who's becoming one of the, most in-demand golf architects in the industry. And we talk about 3 golf courses that he's thinking a ton about right now. So we kind of just chat golf courses. This is going to be a heavy golf course architecture, golf course pod with Augusta National, and then the 3 golf courses that Brian Schneider is thinking about the most right now. So before we get into this podcast, let's talk about our friends at Maui Nui. Here, speaking of something that I use a lot of at Augusta, Maui Nui was a go-to. It is hard to eat healthy at the Masters in Augusta, Georgia. Maui Nui's meat sticks were a savior for me. Maui Nui offers the only 100% wild harvested meat that's completely stress-free and responsibly sourced. It's perfect for anyone looking to elevate their meals with delicious, high-quality protein. This is wild harvested access deer from Maui. This is the most exceptional protein. I was actually telling some of my neighbors about Maui Nui, and they were like, "Wait, that's the access deer?" This is one of my neighbors who's kind of a health nut. He was like, "That's supposed to be the best protein you possibly can eat," and it is. One of the beauties is you're also, when you're doing this, it's a good thing for the environment, for the Maui environment who have a deer issue there. So Maui Nui Venison is offering Fried Egg listeners a limited collection of my favorite cuts and products, but the supply is limited. So if you head to Maui Nui Venison, that's MAUINUI venison.com/egg, you can secure your access. So that's Maui Nui Venison, MAUINUI venison.com/egg. You can check out Maui Nui. This stuff's delicious and it's really good for you. I highly, highly recommend it. All right, let's get to Cameron Hurdus on playing Augusta National and his thoughts on Augusta National. All right, Cameron Hurdus. I would say you're our head of creative. I think that's your title. I'm not sure. We're not big on titles here at Friday Golf. You spent a week trucking around the Augusta National. I mean, and when I say trucking, you're carrying around cameras. You're out there for basically 12 hours a day, up and down the hills. What are your, well, let's start this. Why you're on here is you won the media lottery. You played Augusta National on Monday, but I would love to hear what you've learned the last 2 years spending an immense amount of time at Augusta National with just getting around in terms of patrons and the golf course.
It is one of those things where I felt much more comfortable this year working the Masters tournament as a photographer. The big thing with media is that you do not get inside the ropes access to the tournament. which I think is part of the fun part. That's part of the challenge. But it also means that you need to learn like the best places to get shots of players, especially when the crowds build, especially when Rory and Bryson are playing in back-to-back groups or in the same group. So it's just, yeah, I mean, I felt so much more comfortable this year. You just figuring out spots to get to, routes. And I think the most important thing too is like, and it was important late Sunday, was just being able to get to certain points quickly. If you know, like a group might be coming up 17, and then, for example, Rory's playing 14 and 15 on Sunday, and you're trying to get places quickly, just like knowing if there are shortcuts, just getting around. I felt like I learned a lot the first year and then this year, just being able to move quickly from point to point.
Yeah, like a great example of that is like sometimes you have to walk further to get somewhere faster. Like the direct route is so often not the fastest route. But like to me, like getting to the if you want to watch 15, 16, 17 and it's like busy, you have to get to the left side of 15 because then you could watch every single one of the holes. But if you're not on the left, and it's hard to get from Amen Corner to the left side of 15. Like that's a very challenging way to place to get to. And you can do all kinds of things. And the key though is getting across and waiting at the one place. I find it's harder. It takes longer if you wait at the layup area of 15 to get across than it does if you just walk around 16.
This is the big thing that I remembered when you move from practice rounds to the tournament days, is the crosswalks and how important it is, and how, in a lot of cases, because all of a sudden there's groups back to back to back, whereas like practice round days, a lot of times you have gaps and the crosswalks are just open and it's easy to get across the holes. But like even getting from, say, the right side of 9 back to the press building, a lot of times I would just hoof it around 9 green and the 1T, which is, it's annoying because it's like a big hill to get up there.
Huge hill.
But if there's a group coming up 9 and a group teeing off 1, you might be sitting there for like 10 minutes potentially, like waiting for both of those crosswalks to clear. So it's just stuff like that. Like, a lot of times, like you said, you have to go around to get somewhere more quickly.
So you played Augusta National, and we're not going to go shot by shot here.
We don't want to. No,
nobody needs that. PJ's raising his hand in the background. He wants that. But you're very into golf architecture. I referenced this in the intro. You've won the Lido competition. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. You've won the Lido competition 3 times. You're banned from the event, which I think is humorous. But what was I guess like I had like some takeaways when I got to like, you've covered the event now 2 years. You spent a ton of time on site. What was the biggest thing that you picked up from being inside the ropes and playing Augusta National that you hadn't picked up outside the ropes or on TV?
I will start by saying I intentionally haven't read your piece or Brendan's piece from the last 2 years, just trying to keep a clear mind. So if I like hit some things that you guys talked about, I apologize.
Brendan wasn't on this podcast talking about his round.
Oh, really?
So,
I forget.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, they had nobody's heard this for 2 years since me and Garrett talked about my round. So this is kind of fresh.
It's, it's just a strange experience. There's a lot of spots on the golf course where you feel like you can get close to or approximate like an approach shot, but there's a lot of spots when you're finally inside the ropes that it feels really strange. But I think the biggest thing I picked up on, and I wrote about it, was just how relentless the golf course feels from a golf perspective, and how you just constantly feel like you're on a razor's edge of like complete disaster at all times. And I think when you're also struggling to hit shots, that gets amplified a lot, and the danger areas sort of, they amplify in your mind. But yeah, it's just like this constant sort of fear, and it's tough to like relax and just like make a swing a lot of times because you see short, you see long, you see left, you see right. Geez, these spots where getting down in 2 is just going to be almost impossible if you miss.
As Brandel Chambly, Golf Channel's Brandel Chambly coined it, sensory blitzkrieg.
Yeah, 100%.
It is. And the thing that's ironic about it is that it does all that. And what you just said is perfect, is like, it makes it really hard to like swing the club freely. And it's like the number one thing that you have to do there is play with freedom.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you're going to achieve the shots. They're achievable shots. All of them are achievable. But to achieve them, there has to be freedom in the swing, because you can't just like guard against something out there, because then when you're guarding against it, the margins are so thin.
And it's what I love about it is you can always see there's always a route to the hole, right? Like you can see the shot a lot of times. You're like, yeah, if I just get the ball to here, it'll feed in. And it rewards great shots. And we see that every year. Like guys shoot 65, 66 pretty consistently if you're swinging the club well during the tournament. Like it is possible. But and so you can see those shots, but it's just, yeah, if you're not free, if there's any doubt in your mind, it's so difficult to find those spots.
It's fun that played out. So what you just said like explains the tournament so well, in the sense of like, so Rory and Bryson on Sunday, like there's probably just a lot more rattling around in each of their brains. Both of them are like pretty noted. I mean, whether or not, like Bryson talked about, somebody asked him if he could do a YouTube video at Augusta, what he would do. He said like the history, and, Rory McIlroy's got an incredible history mind. Like he could probably like rattle off European Tour Player of the Years for 25 straight years, incredible history mind. And you think about like they had this more stuff on their mind, and they're playing really pretty good golf. Bryson obviously was struggling with approach, but scoring incredibly well. And they go shoot 73, 75. And it's just a matter of like probably just not being as free as they were the first 2 days or first 3 days, it's an amazing thing. Was there a particular hole that stood out that you hadn't, maybe given enough credit to?
I would say probably the 5th hole. And I think part of that is because it was the first hole I played really well, and I did make a birdie on that hole.
It's a great birdie.
But it's like, which was like a top 5 golf moment for me in my life, probably. But yeah, that's a hole where you probably don't go to it a lot as a patron or even as a media member, because it sort of sits isolated up on the ridge.
This year I started a personal rule that I don't go to the 5th hole because I just don't want to get stuck back there.
Yeah, I think there was one day, it was Thursday or Friday, where I realized I just completely missed it the day before. I just never walked up to it. And like, yeah, it's kind of hard to get to, and you get stuck, and there's really no reason to be down the right side of it unless you're entering from the south gate, I guess. But it's a really cool hole. And
awesome hole.
And I think the benefit of playing the member tees on that hole is that it allows you, if you hit a good drive, to carry the bunkers down the left, which I think is important. And I think it's something they've lost from the championship tees. Like, I think the fact that it's supposed to set up more like a road hole, you should be able to access the far left side of the fairway, because especially to that back right Sunday pin, it really allows you to hit more up the length of the green versus across the false front. And then the pin is like 2 paces from the back edge. I mean, it's like one of the scariest pins on the golf course, probably. So I think that hole, I haven't watched it as much recently, but it it certainly clicked in my head more, I think, when I played it and hit a couple nice shots on it as well.
I think that they did the renovation. It would have been maybe 2020 ish
For the fifth, yeah, something like that.
And they obviously moved the tees way back. That was part of their kind of moving a road. And it reintroduced the hill, which I think is great for the tee shot. It is and I think the longest hitters can carry the bunker. But if you think about those bunkers in place of, if you're thinking about the 17th at the old course, in place of the old course hotel and kind of the diagonal, like that's what those bunkers are supposed to be. And the bunkers don't mimic that strategy very well. They're just kind of like there and very penal, and it doesn't promote any sort of thought of like, I'm going to try and get close to it, because there's no reason to be anywhere near them because of how far they eat in and how they didn't incorporate. Like, to me, the most interesting part of that hole is the ridge on the left.
Yeah.
And that ridge on the left is just not even in play.
Players, it would be amazing to see players challenging the left side, because if you miss left, like, you're gone down the hill, down the ridge, with the current setup. And I think with the way they push the tee back, it sort of just straightened the hole more. And so guys you just play right of the bunker, because those bunkers feel like they're about 20 feet deep. So in most cases, they're so deep. It's kind of just an auto layup probably anyway. So guys just don't even want to challenge them. So they play out to the right, and then they've got sort of a mid iron in. But it doesn't set up. But to me, like, the green makes so much more sense when you approach it from the left. You can see sort of the strategy and how it lengthens the green for you on that approach shot, which I think is really neat.
It is such a cool green. And one of my perches is always I go basically from 4 to 6. So I skip and I go behind 6, which is a great place to watch golf. And I always think, when I'm sitting behind 6 green, of that ridge on 5, because it really just like sits right above the 6th green, and how, if that ridge was cleared and there was golf, like, how amazing of a viewing place it would be to be watching 5 from down low up, And
I love looking from 6 up the hill to 5 bunkers. I mean, they're like so high up. Like, it's an impressive ridge. Like, it's significant and it's unique to the property. It's the only hole that really does that, and it would be cool if you could see that across there.
Yeah, I think that's like, it also like obscures how cool the property is. That there's this like back high ridge that you only play one hole on, and
you don't realize it.
Yeah, because it's so isolated. The way it is, like it with the trees, and the ornamentals, it kind of like, you're kind of like in your own world over there. It's like, it feels like a separate wing to the house.
Yeah.
But really, it's just like, it would be like, if you put it in like a housing term, it would be like if you were on like a hallway above your family room. Like if you had like a open hallway above your family room, and there was like another room that you're looking down on. And now it's just like, it's just walled. It's just a wall, right? And so you don't get that feel of like being able to look down.
But it is like one of the cooler holes on the golf course, I sort of realized as I played it too, there's that aspect too.
It's kind of, I think it's probably the hole that marries like dramatic topography with a super dramatic green. It's the only hole that kind of has like both the green and the topography amped up to like a 10.
Yeah. It's those greens those pins are terrifying. I mean, the back ones are terrifying. Because that's the thing too, is the green is perched on the edge of that ridge basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 times in my life I've seen someone actually miss the bunker and go all the way down the hill, because you're basically gone at that point. So that Sunday pin feels like it's just hanging off a cliff essentially. So yeah, that's a cool spot.
In terms of shots, what were your 3 favorite individual golf shots out there? Not like that you hit, that like you enjoyed the process of hitting, from like the way you just looked at it and saw it.
I would say it's funny, the one that I was dreaming about once I got selected, when I won the media lottery, was the second shot into 8, I think. Which is really funny because you can't see the green. Like if you hit a good drive, it's completely blind. But I'm a sucker for blind shots. And so I hit a good drive on that hole, which was nice. So, I mean, you can carry the bunker pretty easily from the member tees.
You're in the Rory zone then.
I think I was past the crosswalk. I think I had like 190 into the pin, to that middle pin, which was a really neat pin also. Like
So like right on that ridge?
Right on the ridge, sort of like, so I ended up about 15 feet short, and you're sort of putting across the ridge. So it's sort of like a double breaker, and it just sits right on top. But yeah, that for whatever reason, mostly because of the green, I guess, that was a hole where I really wanted to hit a good drive and have a decent angle into that green, which I did. I set up perfectly. I was up the right, and then you run up to the top, and there's like one pine tree in the distance, and essentially the top of one of those mounds that you can use to like line up your second shot. And I hit a great shot, and then I thought I pulled it a little bit too much, and I was really concerned that I was going to miss the hills left, which like also would be a fun shot to hit. But my caddy Bussy was standing up on top of the hill, and he gave me the thumbs up, which was very exciting because I knew I was going to have an eagle putt on 8, which was great. That was a good one.
You didn't make it, did you?
I didn't make it. I left it like, I hit a good putt. I left it probably 6 or 8 inches short. Because it kind of runs away after the hole. It's a little, it's scary. Let's see, what other shots? Well, so I mean, 14 was another approach that I'd always wanted to hit, and just had I mean, at that point I was like really struggling. And
I read your write-up. You have a write-up on the website, but I think you said fatigue was setting in. I mean, you probably, like, I want to do this justice. If I had to estimate, I would estimate that you walk with like 25 pounds of camera gear, 40 to 50,000 steps a day when we go to the Masters.
That's the thing. And like, you're so amped the whole week that you're not even tired. So you're not sleeping a whole lot either.
No.
And I think, and I realized that, yeah, my legs at that point, I wasn't swinging the driver well, which is pretty common for me. But at that point, my legs were completely gone. And I sort of, I snap hooked it into, there's those 2 big firethorn bushes in between 14 and 15, like right in the middle of the trees. So I hit it in the first one, took a drop, hit a tree. It dropped into the second firethorn bush about 50 yards further up. So then I took another drop, and at this point, like, I think they were just going to pick up my ball, and I was like, I want to hit a shot into the screen, right? Like, I've been dreaming of hitting a shot into the screen, into this Sunday pin. So I hit a punch out. It just caught another branch, of course, drops down about 70 yards from the green, which is actually kind of a perfect distance. So I had like a 70-yard pitch to that Sunday pin, which sort of sits in that bowl, and hit one of the best shots of the day. One hopped it onto the back slope and spun it almost into the hole to like tap in, which was for like my 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever I made on the hole, which was great. That was a good one.
That's one of my big regrets about my round, was that I blew my drive on 13 into the trees right and had to lay up. And then on 14, I blew it into the trees right, and I hit the green, but it was like not the type of shot that I wanted to hit into the green, you know, like where I was like coming from in the trees and just
it's
had
such
like
a hard
tiny
tee shot.
window.
It's such really an awkward tee shot, 14. Like, Yeah.
Rory talked about how he had trouble seeing the lines on 7, 14, and 17, all going that direction. And they, like, if you think about them, they all play like along the side of the hill, and you have the camber, and it makes the fairways feel so small. Even and obviously 7 and 17 are pretty small.
It's one of my favorite parts of Augusta, and something I picked up on the first time I went was just how well the routing is constantly just sort of working slightly against whatever the slope is. In order to hold the fairway, you've got to either take an aggressive line or work the ball correctly into that slope, whether it's 2, whether it's 7, 14, 17. Yeah, they all sort of work slightly one direction.
I think that's the thing that doesn't get talked about a ton about Augusta National is that the routing, how often you play along side hills. Like when you get a kind of, I wouldn't call it a heaving, maybe a heaving site. You could probably throw it in that category.
I think so.
Want, is like so often you're playing up and down and over. And there, the magic of it is that the topography allowed for so many holes to play along the slope, like 14, like 17, like 7.
I would recommend anyone to just look at the topography map, the topo map of Augusta, the property, and to me, the holes make so much more sense when you see them on top of the topo lines, because you can see how the waterways were working down the property in these natural valleys that are created, like between 2 and 8, for example, and how those both feed in. 2 sort of feeds both directions, off the left and the right, as it works down the hill. But to me, you just see these subtle little movements one direction or the other, and how they just so cleverly like routed the holes along and against those slopes.
What's your last shot that you...
Oh man. Let's see. I hit a poor drive on 3 and I had like 125. I was left of the bunkers and I tried to get key with it. So the ball came all the way back down. I was basically in the Scotty zone, which I feel like you kind of just have to hit that shot to realize how freaking insane it is. Like how hard it is.
I feel like they make it look so easy.
I think the Sunday pin on 3 like might be top 3 scariest championship pins in golf. And to me, that green, again, it's like I've walked around it a bunch now, like at the tournament, but when you're standing on it, it felt so much smaller to me standing on that green, on the green, than off the green.
I pretty much read putts with my feet. And to me, the third green, my feet felt like on fire when I stepped on them, because it's so severe too. The slope.
It's so severe. And that was something that I noticed this year and it's not like I did notice it, but when you're standing on, say, 4T, or you're walking down the right side of 4 and you look back at 3, you can see the entire third green just facing you. And you realize how much it's pitched away from the approach shot. So you feel like you have about a half an inch spot to land your chip shot on 3, which I didn't quite do. And then I will say, actually, as a follow-up, one other shot was I ended up on the middle tier on 9 to that front left pin. And Bussy, my caddy, who's like a local legend and is an amazing green reader, gave me a pretty fantastic read. But that honestly was probably one of the best shots I hit, was that lag putt to 9, which still went about 2.5 feet by. But that was kind of a cool one as well.
Yeah, that you had a good caddy, huh?
Bussy was great. Brendan had him. I don't think you had him, did you?
I didn't have him.
You didn't have him.
Did he? He paid worth his weight on the greens, I hear.
100%. I like shudder to think about what would have happened. A, if I'd been reading those greens by myself, and B, if there had been, I mean, I'm sure there's a few guys out there that can read the greens well, but it was pretty clear. And the interesting thing too was that he was clearly struggling to read some of the new greens. Like 15, he knows the greens so well in his head that he gave me a read on 15, and it just like didn't quite do what he thought it was going to do. And that was a green that got rebuilt last year, which was kind of an interesting little note that I had from that round also.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And they were 16 was quite firm too. Like, so I was picking his brain a little bit on that green too. What had changed. But
the weather was you got breezy hot. That had to be intense.
It was hot, and it was blowing like a steady 20 from the south, which meant that 6 was straight downwind. And I will tell you,
that's impossible.
I hit a good shot. It was right at the pin, landed about 2 feet over the green, and shot 40 yards basically up between the tees on 7. And normally, like during a tournament, there'd be patrons there to like stop the ball, but there was nothing to stop it. And I ended up about 40 yards over the green on 6. Yeah.
Where'd you end up after that?
You know what? I hit a phenomenal chip, and I kept it on the top tier, maybe about 12 or 14 feet, which was actually a really good shot from there.
I think if I were playing from 40 yards over that green to that back pin, I think I'd play for just if you're thinking about it directionally coming from back, I'd play for short left fringe. Just be playing to just barely creep it into the fringe so I could putt the next one.
I knew that it was one of those shots. I mean, you're out there. I'm assuming hey, this might be the only time I play. I'm going to try these shots. And I know that if I don't pull this shot off, it might end up 40 yards down the front of the green. But I hit it perfectly, and it just had the right amount of spin and kept it on that top tier, which was huge.
All right, personal question. Who's the first person you called after your round?
You know what? With the time difference, because my parents are on the West Coast too, I think the first person I called was my girlfriend, Jess, actually. Right. But she was very excited. She actually, I was out. She was texting me Sunday because everyone was watching on Sunday. So she was at home alone, and she turned the golf on Sunday and was watching. So she was very excited about that. It
was wild how many texts I got from random people that don't watch golf that watch Sunday.
It really, I know you and Brendan talked about it already, but it really and Trevor hit a nerve, I think. It just sort of hit everyone. So it was cool. It's been cool to just I've seen some friends since then too, and it's just been cool to talk about and relive all the moments Sunday and Monday.
Yeah, I was talking to a random dad at my town's Easter egg hunt about it. And it was just fun to chat again about it. It's I think it'll be a tournament we talk about for a long, long time. What any grand takeaways from this year's tournament? You're always a take factory, Yeah. You've got the most takes at the company that nobody hears.
Nothing but hot takes. It was tough. You are working. But I'll admit, I'm a Rory fan. It was incredibly emotionally exhausting. And there were points where I'm just looking at other fans and we're just shaking our heads, right? I wrote about, Brendan talked about after he hit the tee shot on 12, it was an exodus. Everyone was just walking up the hill, right? And my mind was thinking, should I just go try and get a spot on 18 now? Should I just set up camp and get an angle as he's coming up 18, because he's obviously going to win? And watched him hit his tee shot and lay up on 13. And then when he dumped it, it was just had to throw the entire game plan in the trash and figure out what to do. I will say, I think Rory got jammed by a catch basin on 13, if I'm being completely honest. There's like...
He said he was on an upslope.
Yeah, so I found the spot. It's right near Rays Creek, but there's like this big drain that sits right down there. And I think his ball just collected into it and he ended up on the front of it on the upslope, which it was kind of, yeah, I mean, it's like kind of an awkward shot. I think he kind of got jammed on 13, not going to lie.
I don't think he had a good shot, whether or not he got jammed by the catch basin, but it could have made the shot a little more difficult.
It is. And like, that's the thing about Augusta is in the back of your mind, you're thinking, if I pull this a little bit, I'm going to have 40 feet down the hill and like, I'm going to have to hit the most incredible 2-putt, like to get out of here with a par, right? And so you just start to maybe like shade a yard or two right, a yard or two right. And then all of a sudden you make, like an uncommitted swing and that happens.
I think the frustrating thing about it is like, the greens are, I think, like what make Augusta so amazing. And in the pinnable locations, they are very puttable, but the slopes are so severe. And what drives me crazy is how like people don't take away that like, okay, like if you have heavy contouring that creates these great like locations on greens, that then in that combined with some width is going to make some really interesting strategy.
Yeah.
Nobody takes away that the greens, like we end up with people softening. Like, I mean, all the clubs in the Northeast are just, not all, I'm stereotyping. So many historic clubs in the South, in the Northeast, are softening their greens for green speed because they want to have fast greens. And it's like, but the heavy contouring is what makes the greens special and dynamic and creates that, like what you just said, where you in the back of your head, you shade because you know what, if I miss this left, like all of a sudden I'm going to, have this really hard 2-putt.
That's the thing. And you and Trevor hit on it, and I think you have to play it to realize it, but like you I was back left on 4. I was on the green, but I had like, 45 feet from the top shelf to the bottom shelf. I hit an incredible lag putt and it went 6 feet by. And it's like, I just hit a great shot but you're just constantly grinding. Like you rarely ever have tap-ins, which I think Trevor said that. It just like doesn't happen out there.
I think that's the thing. Cameron, you played tournament golf as a kid. To me, the most important thing as a tournament golfer is like stress management. It's especially when you play a 4-day tournament, like when you can keep stress off you, and like stress generally comes in the form of when you're trying to save pars. And 4 to 10 foot putts really are like huge, like areas of stress.
Yeah.
And Augusta, it just feels like you're always having those, whether it's for par or bogey or worse.
Especially when you're not hitting the ball. If you're not hitting it to the correct spots,
yes,
the magnitude of the stress just amps up on every single hole, because all of a sudden, if you miss into the wrong spot, whether it's a chip or a putt, getting down in 2 sometimes just feels like impossible. Like you can't do it.
So you made 3 birdies.
Yeah.
5, 8, and where else?
16.
Back right 16.
The back right pin. Yeah.
What's your least favorite hole too?
It's a great tournament hole and it's well positioned in the round. And I will say, like, I know they set that pin. It was like a Nicholas anniversary celebration.
50th
I think.
Anniversary.
Yeah. It's a great pin. I wish that they would sort of alternate, honestly. Like you've got to hit a good shot to the funnel pin also, obviously, to catch the funnel correctly, but you've got to hit such a good shot to sort of hold that back right section on 16 as well. And I hit a great shot on that hole.
It's amazing when you heard Rory after talk about how in the back of his head, like he knew he had a birdie opportunity at 15, but 16 he was really worried about because it was going to be hard to that back right pin. He's like, because it wasn't in the traditional spot, and I was pretty worried about hitting a shot back there.
It's a difficult one. You have to flight it correctly. The spin has to be right, because it'll feed off right, and going long is not great, and then obviously it'll funnel down to the left as well. But yeah, they've really stuck with the low left pin for a long time. I feel like they used to mix it up a bit more, and I do hope they kind of bounce around on 16 going forward, because I think that's actually a really interesting pin on Sunday.
Would be fun. It changes the dynamic of the finish where 16, 17, 18 are just like hold on
exactly
for dear life.
Yeah.
And it's kind of where then 13, 14, 15 you gotta make hay.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Cameron, thank you for coming on. Thank you for all your work during the Masters Week. You make all of our visual visual things we do pop. So thank you, and I couldn't have been happier that you got the chance to play.
Well, thanks. I think the whole team. It was a team effort, Masters Week. But I was just happy to be out there. There's not much better.
All right, let's head over to Brian Schneider. Big thanks to Cameron for coming on the pod. It is like literally his least favorite thing to do is to appear on the podcast. He likes to be the man behind the scenes. He does not like to be out front, but he's always very well thought out. So big thanks to Cameron for coming on. Before we get over to Brian Schneider, let's talk about our friends at Red Rooster. These gloves are amazing. We had this for the Club TFE member gift. We did a fried egg glove, and I couldn't believe the resounding feedback. I was getting texts left and right from people being like, this is like the best glove. How can I buy more? So redroostergolf.com is where you can check out all their full suite of products. But one thing I would love to call out is that it's April. It's a rainy time of year. Why don't you check out their rain gloves? Red Rooster's rain gloves are known for their sleek design and functionality. They are water resistant, not waterproof, so you can maintain your grip without compromising feel. They are sold in pairs for both hands, and they have sizes for men and women. And if you use the promo code FriedEgg15, you'll get 15% off your order. So go there, beginning of the season for Midwest, Northeast people, Pacific Northwest people. It's kind of, the real golf season. Use that promo code FriedEgg15 and stock up on gloves. That's redroostergolf.com. And let's get to Brian Schneider. All right, Brian, welcome on. I'm excited to chat with you. This is I feel like we talk every year, but new segment that we're going to do on this podcast. And this is I appreciated when I texted you your response, because that's the whole point of it. This is a moving target. It changes all the time. What are the three courses that are rattling around your brain the most right now? And obviously you texted me something along the lines of like, my three at this point are going to be different than the three I tell you tomorrow. So
yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to three, and it's it's definitely a moment in time.
Exactly. Yeah. It completely changes based off the day of the week. I think with this, my answer today would be different tomorrow. So I think that's what makes this fun, is it doesn't mean it's just an end all be all, my three favorite. It's just what I'm thinking about now. So let's get into it. You're a busy man. I don't want to keep you around. I know you got a lot of stuff in the hopper, and we're going to be excited to see some of your new stuff coming online this year. But what is one course that you are thinking about a lot?
So I've been fortunate to see a few virgin pieces of land in the last week or so. So I've got for a few topo maps laying around that I've been playing with. One of which, the site is kind of a series of big ridges and valleys. And my mind immediately went to Seminole for that. So I've been thinking a lot about Seminole, which is not something I do often. Seminole it's a pretty wonderful place, and it's a very, very good golf course for people like you who play golf very well. It's less enjoyable for people like me who don't play as well as you do. So I've got a lot of respect for the design. I mean, it's a brilliant piece of work, the way that Ross took advantage of the features of that site, and it's full of great golf holes. But it's kind of like Pine Valley, and that is full of great golf holes that are, almost unanimously, designed and especially maintained in a way that makes it a real challenge. So it's a place I respect. It's a wonderful place. It's not a place I love, but from a routing perspective, some of the challenges of this map I've been playing with, my mind went to Seminole and how Ross, took advantage. There's the ridge on the ocean and the ridge a few hundred yards inland, and how many of the holes play pretty gracefully up and down across those ridges. And some of the best holes on the property are the ones that really take advantage of the topography in unusual ways, like the fourth and the sixth and the third. So Seminole's one that's been popping around my head just this morning and today as I'm playing around with this map.
There's a lot of directions to go with Seminole. It is obviously it's one of the more revered golf courses. I also think it's one of the most, like, it's a great golf course, but I kind of think it falls in the Chicago golf bucket of golf courses where, like, people will say it's overrated because it's not. I don't think like it's overwhelmingly like awe-striking the first time you play it. But as the property, for I would say 60% of the property is fairly mundane. I mean, you have, as you alluded to, those two big ridges, and in between, it's kind of just relatively flat land.
Very flat and low.
Yeah, and low, right? It's not exactly like, I don't think you would take that site and say it's extraordinary, but the golf that was produced on it is, and it is completely how those ridges are used, right? I think I compared it to like a salad bowl years ago. I wrote, it's a big salad bowl, and the two ridges are the forks, like your tongs that you put in the bowl to prepare the salad, and they're kind of on the edges. I think that's the description I use to give people kind of a more idea of what the site is like. So it's kind of like, you have these high ridges on the outside that are like almost like the edges of the bowl, and it is amazing how many holes interact with those ridges, right? There's only probably 2 or 3 that don't have some connection to one of those ridges.
Yep. Yeah, whether it's a tee, you're teeing off from up high down to the flats, whether you're playing through the flats up to a green halfway up, or the holes that play on top of it are the best ones, and off the sides. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and also the way the holes change direction over and over. I mean, it's a windy place. You're right in the ocean, so there's always a breeze. But I don't know that you're playing 2 holes in the same direction, or more than 2 holes in the same direction at all out there, and you're changing direction constantly.
Yeah, the ever-present wind there, like a calm day in South Florida in that location with it right up on the ocean. I mean, a calm day is still going to be like a club and a half, 2 club wind. Yeah. I think it accentuates the golf so much, right? If you put that place in a very unwindy place, let's just call Central Ohio, I don't think it would have the same reverence as it does because of the natural conditions and elements that it has on a day in, day out. It's a reliable wind. And I think like that's the thing, like when you're able to create a course that moves around as much as it does, it just is like it's a constant pressure, right? I always think that like great golfers have the ability to play these like stress-free rounds. And great architecture has a way of compiling stress. And if you think about yourself as a human being, like stress eventually, you can only take on so much stress before you crack. And I think that's what kind of a round of golf does. And I don't know if there's a course that's better at accumulating stress on you than Seminole. I think like ones that I would think of in a similar vein, like Muirfield would be one that accumulates stress. Like you just, like nothing is, you don't look at anything and think that's overly hard. There are a few shots, like, I mean, if you're playing 17 and the wind's coming off the ocean, that could be overly hard. But like for the most part, none of the shots feel overly hard, but the accumulation of them over the course of 18 holes, you are going to make a mistake and then you are going to get in a really difficult position. I would say, you know, one of the tough things, as an architect, having those two ridges, they're big ridges. Does that make it difficult because it can maybe make it feel monotonous?
Some of the holes blend together a bit. You know, the ones that are playing east-west, you know, there are some of those holes that follow a similar pattern, definitely. It's hard to distinguish 2 from 11, for instance. Muirfield has a little bit of that too. But, you know, the mention of Chicago Golf Club is interesting because you look at both of those sites and just, you know, if you're analyzing the architecture, it's like, man, those guys got the most out of those two sites. You know, to your point, you wouldn't necessarily look at either one of those sites. You know, Seminole's a cool site. I mean, you're on the ocean, You've got sand dunes, but there's a bunch of that property that was swamp, essentially. It's like, wow, he really did the best he could with that site. Chicago is that way, certainly. You know, it reminds me a lot of Pinehurst too. And, you know, the greens at both of those places tend to be elevated and crowny. And when they're firm and in the wind, you know, it's nothing new that wind and firm greens are the things that make golf really hard for good players. But I think, you know, as long as players hit it now, as far as players hit it, those two things are more important than ever. And, you know, there aren't many days you go to Seminole where the greens aren't firm and it's not blowing. So, you know, it is always a test for good players.
What amazes me, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, how these guys that are members there, these older guys, like that's the course they play all the time. But they figure out how to get around it. Like, I don't understand how, like, if I played there every day, it would just kick my ass eventually. I think I'd just give up.
Mm-hmm.
But these guys play there all the time. And it's like these guys that are 70 years old, like scratch out 74s. I think there is like an aspect of that golf course where the vast majority of people don't play it enough to really, you know, but the vast majority of people never play it. But like, you know, the people that do play it once or twice every 5 years, like, you know, rare, like I do think that golf course, similar to Pinehurst number 2, if you know where to manage your misses, you can start to get around it a little bit more. Like the first couple times, you just have no chance. You're going to rip balls off greens. You're going to miss long in places that you just can't miss, even though you're 20 feet from the hole. Like, you know, that I think there is like an aspect of that golf course. Mismanagement is like the number one thing you have to do because you're going to miss out there with the wind and firmness.
Yeah. A lot of the best courses are that way. I mean, Pine Valley certainly is that way. Like, you know, the first time around, you're just in awe of everything and you feel like you can't miss anywhere. And the more you get to know it, you realize, well, there's some space out here. If you can control your ball, you know where to hedge. Lido is very much that way too. You know, the first visitors to Lido are always like, wow, that's a really hard golf course. After you've played it a bit, you start to learn, well, yeah, because you missed it over there when the pin's there. You had no chance, but you have 70 yards of room in that direction to make your second shot that much easier. That's not uncommon among some really good golf courses that people think are really hard.
The Lido is such a interesting golf course. I love that it is now like that resort guys get to play it. It's open, you know, obviously it's like a limited amount of resort play at Sand Valley a day on the Lido. I love that it's like coming clear that like the resort guests don't like the Lido. And their favorite, like, it's like playing it one time. It's really hard.
It's like the old course. I mean, to me, it's more like the old course than any course I've played because it's super vague off the tees. You go to St. Andrews, and if you've never walked a golf course before, you're just, for the next 4 hours, you're just going to hit it where your caddy points.
Yeah.
And Lido's got a lot of that. It's like, just hit it there. And there's nothing terribly fun about doing that until you get to learn what's on the other side of that ridge that you can't see over, or what the green looks like. And the more you get to know it yourself, the more engaging it gets. But the first time around, it's, I remember going to Lido shortly after they opened and went in the pro shop and was talking to the guys in there, and man, everybody loves it. People are just raving about it. And I was like, I think most of those people are lying. They've been told that this is going to be some great thing, so they feel compelled to rave about how great it is. But I don't think most people the first time around have any idea what they're doing, and certainly don't appreciate all the subtlety. And that's very much the case at the old course. I feel bad for people that go to St. Andrews or go to Scotland and, play 7 top 100 courses in a week and, fly through St. Andrews, play the old course, because you can't possibly enjoy and appreciate it the way you could if we all had the luxury to play there often.
I feel like the Lido is such a local knowledge place. It is a golf course that the first time around, you're just like hitting it to places, as you said, very vague off the tee. Great way to describe it. But then if you start to understand where you're trying to get to with different hole locations, you can effectively create situations where you hit regularly into gathering pins. I always think of Tom's quote. Like, I think this was in the 3rd podcast I ever did with him. It was about Stream Song Blue. I think the question was like, what do you wish people could know about this golf course? He said, I wish there were signs on the golf course that I could put on contours that when you're on the wrong side of a contour, it says you have hit it in the wrong spot, because like every contour has a helping side and a hurting side. But like at the Lido, it's a great example of if you get to a certain position off this vague tee shot, if it's kind of like an open-ended question. If you can get off the blocks and have like a great, like I find writing to be like this. If I can get out of the blocks with a great opening paragraph, which is always my kryptonite as an author, is that I just can't get started. But if you get off the blocks, then everything falls into place, right? And the Lido is so similar to this. Like if you can get it into the right spot, if you know where the hole location is, you get it into the right spot, all of a sudden it becomes like a very friendly golf course. Mm-hmm. But if you're in the wrong spot, it is a very challenging golf course. And I do think like the value of a great caddy out there is so huge. I had a caddy this summer out there that like, he told me, like, I generally feel like I have like he told me to hit it like 30 yards short of a green. And I was like, really? And he was like 30 yards short, 30 yards left. And I think it was on 7. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and it fed right to the hole, and then from that moment on, I was listening. You just get into good spots, and then all of a sudden you can take advantage of the golf.
Yeah, I had some really good caddies there, but you're right. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to get over the vagueness of the tee shots, like on 2. It's like, trust me, there's a bunch of space on the other side of that ridge. Just hit it over there. But the greens are the thing. Like and that takes more time to get to know the greens. But it's like, oh, the pin's back left today. I can't go anywhere near there. I've got to miss here. I'm better off being 20 yards short and left than anywhere right of center. But that's what makes golf fun too. I mean, as a member, that's what you want in a golf course is, the variability from day to day that those sorts of that sort of architecture gives you. But also just taking time to figure out a golf course, and hopefully you don't know the best way to play a hole the first time you play it, and hopefully the best way to play a hole changes from day to day. I don't know that Seminole's quite that way. I think Seminole's a bit more prescriptive. Just like, those greens are just hard, and if there's a preferred angle where you're playing down the length of some of those greens, and if you miss that 10 yards right or left, playing across the green a little bit is a much harder shot.
This is kind of what I was getting at with the big ridge topography. Does that just generally lend itself to prescriptive golf? More so than the smaller, like more human size contouring?
Probably. I have learned about my own taste that I kind of like flat golf. To me, the best, not necessarily tee shots, but the best approach shots to me are the ones that are, level or downhill a little bit, because then I can play short of the green and let it run on and I can watch that. I don't really like playing 20 or 30 feet up to a green. I don't enjoy that shot that much because you can't see what the ball does when it lands, and you're limited in the shots you can play. If you're relatively flat, like at St. Andrews or Hollywood's one of my favorite places to play, a lot of those shots are just kind of ground level and you can hit any shot you want. So yeah, I think you do have a little more freedom to play a variety of shots on flatter ground. When you get into hilly ground, the land is telling you more what kind of shots you want to hit.
All right, let's get to number 2. What's your second course that you're thinking a lot of?
So one of the other topo maps that's laying in front of me reminds me of a few of my favorite places, and I'm going to cheat and lump 3 places together.
I get accused of doing this all the time on the pod.
It's because you like to talk.
Well, I just like to jam stuff together so that my I do this for our 5 things about majors. This is where I get accused of having like 8 things that I make into 5.
It's like the One Bite Pizza review.
I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you turning the tables on me here.
The 3 I'll say are Garden City and Walton Heath, Old, and Woodall Spa, which to me are all very closely related cousins. Again, all 3 built on relatively flat ground. There aren't any big hills at any of those places. And the architecture embraces that at those places. So many of the greens at all 3 of those places are just laying on the ground, subtle tilts, left to right, right to left, away from you in some cases. And the features aren't, there's some stuff built up above ground, but a lot of the bunkers are just like sunken down in the ground. And this site that I'm playing with, this map, reminds me so much of that there's just this beautiful, gentle movement, just like plus or minus 7 or 8 feet, sandy, gravelly soils that drain really well. And I think it would lend itself really well to that style of architecture. So as I'm, playing with the map and working on these routings, I'm finding places, green sites that are just quiet on the ground, not necessarily on a high, not necessarily in a pocket, but just kind of in open space on the ground and tilting in an inconvenient direction. I think that's really cool, old school architecture. And, Garden City, I'm fortunate to work at Garden City and have spent a lot of time there over the years. And, a couple of years ago, they were looking at adding a couple back tees. And I'm thinking to myself, who are these for? And I asked, what was, every spring they host the Travis, the great amateur event. And I was like, what did the medalists shoot last year? And I think the best score was like a 70 or a 71, which is amazing to me because that golf course now, we've spent a lot of time over the past 10 years really restoring it to the photographs in 1936. That was when they last hosted an amateur. That was their last major event. So the golf course now, with the exception of a few back tees and a few forward tees, is almost identical to the golf course they played in 1936. Yet the best amateurs in the country and the world are hovering around par or over par. And the architecture is timeless. I love that sort of architecture. And the golf course is playing firmer than it has in a long time. Their superintendent, Mike McAlevey, has just been pounding sand into the greens and the approaches, and you can hit the shots you want to hit. But that architecture is really simple, but still holds up really well to the best players in the game.
I think that those greens are just so hard to hit into. You always, I feel like you generally know where to land shots. Like, when you're that golf course with the way it's set up distance wise, you get a lot of wedges in your hand. And I think like the best thing you can do to combat wedges is greens that run away, like varying the greens. Because, this is always what I've taken away from Garden City, is like at Garden City, the more you play it, the more worried about where you land wedges. It becomes so much of this is 100. The screen tilts away. I'm not sure how much it tilts away. do I need to land this 94? You start to think it gets you thinking because you're not used to it. Every hole feels like you need to land it a different number, and you get frustrated because like you'll hit a wedge and you're like, oh, it's perfect. And then you end up off the back of the green because it pitches away. Like it just gets a bad bounce, or it takes a big first hop because you get that unpredictability, that comes with just such a wide variety of greens like that. It's just magical how those greens sit on the ground too. I think that's one of the other things is like, it's so hard to decipher from the fairway what's going on at the green and where you want to land it.
And it's about more than just the number too. It's about
yes.
your trajectory. It's like, okay, I've decided now I want to land this 10 yards short, but am I taking a full swing and trying to land it as soft as I can, or am I knocking this down? So it's about trajectory as well as where you want to land it, which, the more you're thinking about what kind of shot and how far you want to hit it, the more compelling golf gets. And you're thinking about what happens after once the ball lands, what's it going to do? I think that's really fascinating. And, another thing we're doing there over the past couple of years, we've been, they've got these sand dams, which are kind of a result of top dressing and, buzzing around with the Sand Pro, working the sand into the green after you've aerified. It leaves a little ring around the green, and it's subtle the first year and slowly builds every year you do that. So we're removing these sand dams around the greens, which, now they're really nondescript. But at the same time, we're adding short grass around some of the greens. So, they used to have, they were never terribly well defined, but some of them had the definition of rough leading into them and around the backs. And we're wiping that out in a lot of places and just adding short grass. So now the greens are just floating in space in a sea of short grass. So I think it's getting even harder to get your bearings and understand where, just how far away is that? It feels uncomfortable because the green is just literally floating in short grass. It's a cool look.
It's also, you get the number, right? You get the 100 yards, but if you play a course, it's one of those courses where you might play it more, it might get more frustrating because like you're thinking 100 yards, like, well, is that 100 yards with the green, with the hole 12 paces on or 16 paces on? And that makes a huge difference because the front part of the green might be different than the back part of the green, Yep.
And then again, the greenkeeper's done a great job of firming up the approaches now, so you can hit all those shots. And it's like, that's the opposite of Seminole, where it's like, you can hit any shot you want, and none of them are easy. You've got to have touch, and you've got to have judgment, and you've got to execute. It's not telling you what to do at all. It gives you a lot of freedom to play whatever shot works best for you, which to me is the best kind of golf.
Did you work on the Woodhall Spa project with Tom?
I did. Yeah.
That's been one of the golf courses that I haven't seen this long fascinated me the most and been high up on list of courses that I really want to see on any given year. What there's you lumped it in with Garden City. There's also seems like there's a lot of like big scale moments out there.
You'll appreciate it because you're a drone guy and you like that perspective being up and you can see more. And Garrett would love it. But when you're on the ground, it's a relatively flat place. So some of those features that look great from 10 feet in the air, you're not really seeing the full depth of them. And the Woodhall Spa is famous for the par threes, and the fifth is probably the boldest of the bunch. But it's this skinny little green that's surrounded by bunkers all around, and they must be, 10, 12 feet deep with straight vertical faces. But the tee's about the same level as the green or just slightly above. So you're not seeing the floors of the bunkers at all from the tee. And it's not until you're up by the green and probably in one of those bunkers that you appreciate how deep they are. There are a few moments around the golf course where, there are things that are kind of in your face. And it's one of the coolest looking golf courses in the world. I mean, it's just the texture is great, and the natives and the sand and the green turf and the trees. I mean, it's really a beautiful kind of rugged, masculine looking golf course. It's really a cool looking golf course.
Does England have the most aesthetically pleasing golf not on the ocean?
Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful golf in England. I mean, and probably the most, America's tough to beat just because it's so big and we have so many golf courses. But as a destination, as a overseas destination for American golfers, England has such a wide variety of, great parkland, heathland, and links. Yeah, a lot of beautiful golf courses in England. The stuff around, if you catch the Heathland courses around London the right time of the year when the heather's in bloom, that's a gorgeous style of golf that you don't really get to experience anywhere but England.
Mm-hmm. All right, what's your third course that you've been thinking of, or fifth?
Yeah, who's counting?
I made this a three. I made this three because I thought three was really hard to pick.
Three is hard, and I cheated.
It's okay.
But I'm not taking any back. The other one is just a project I'm kind of in the middle of, so I'm thinking of it a fair bit right now, and that's at a place that nobody knows of in Connecticut called Silver Spring Country Club in Ridgefield, which isn't far from Greenwich or Westchester, but just far enough. Like Ridgefield's a beautiful little town, and the golf course sits in a space that's largely surrounded by untouched forest, and a really peaceful place, a great membership, a lot of really wonderful people there, and a really pleasant golf course on a nice piece of land. I don't really love touting my own work this way, but it's, you asked the question. So it's a project that we did 9 holes this year, the back 9. We'll get into the front 9 this coming fall. It's a nice routing, so I'm not really changing that too much, but greens, bunkers, tees have been tinkered with a lot over the years, and we're tinkering a lot more and kind of changing the style of the golf course while keeping the bulk of the routing intact. But it's been a really fun project. I think trying to give it its own style and create some funky features that freak people out a little bit when we first built them, but I think are going to be a lot of fun to discover and play over time. That's been a really fun project and something I've got to wrap up a little bit this spring and then get back to in the fall for 9 more holes.
What's it like, completely changing, like the golf course? Everybody's joined there because they seemingly like the golf course. So, as you said, making it funky, provocative, and really not changing the routing, but changing the tees, greens, fairways, bunkers. That's going to completely change the golf course. What's it like overhauling a place? I imagine that when you open, you aren't going to have one unanimous approval from the club, from the member standpoint, because golfers hate change more than anything in the world, But what do you kind of think about while you're changing it and balancing that idea of the membership joined this other place that I'm completely overhauling?
It's a really good point, and a point I make often. But like you said, the members join that place for a reason, presumably because they really like the golf course, and getting them to buy into something completely new isn't always easy, which, frankly, most of the work that I do on older golf courses like Garden City or Hollywood or other places I work is restoring. It's like, you've changed this over the years. It was really cool 100 years ago. Let's just put that back, and let's put that back as faithfully as we can. And then if people don't like that sort of change, you just blame the dead guy and say, well, this isn't me. That's what he did. And that's a little more acceptable. When you start changing things, you open yourself up to more criticism, because my opinion is not necessarily better than anyone else's. I'm the one being paid to make all those changes, so somebody values my opinion, but it's a very different thing, and I haven't done a lot of that. We did some of that at Lanark and Philly a couple of years ago, and I think that went over reasonably well. So there's some players that hate that too. As long as more people love it than hate it, then you're okay, I guess. And if you can replace the members that threaten to leave, you're in a good spot. But it is a challenge. I mean, you're taking something that a lot of people love and have gotten to know for a long time. And, they were giving a lot of tours this fall as we were doing the work, and members would come out and say, oh, this is a completely different hole. I don't know how to play this now. And that's kind of the idea, that you're going to have something fresh to play, and hopefully that's fun and exciting. And hopefully that excitement sticks. It's like discovering something new can be fun as long as people like it. And hopefully that lasts. And there's so much of building a golf course, and people ask about Old Barnwell. It's like, we just built the kind of golf that we like to play. And then you hope that other people like to play that kind of golf too. And this is the same thing. It's like, well, I'm just building something I think is really cool and something I would like to play. I think this hole is going to be more fun now than the version you had before. Hopefully you like what I like. And 2 years from now, you're all really happy with it, or enough of you are happy with it. The club is still in a good space. And you've got a bunch of other people that want to play and join. And we've had a good track record of that. So hopefully that holds for at least a few more projects.
That's my philosophy with like the podcast. People are like, how do you figure out what to talk about? It's like, well, like I just talk about stuff I'm interested in, and I figure there's thousands of other people that are interested in it as well. So I think, taking that, like if I like to play this type of golf, then I think other people will like to play this type of golf is a generally good philosophy. I think like one of the challenges, like I think something that I find fascinating is like country clubs like struggle with chefs, right? So anybody that's ever been around a country club, they rifle through chefs.
Yes, they do.
And I think one of the things that people it's probably like a good place to work. A country club is a good place to be a chef. It's like, well, you have to cook like the staples. Like there has to be a steak. There has to be and one of the struggles is like it's hard for chefs to feel creatively have their creative itch scratch, because like it's a menu that like people want to go to the club and know what's on the menu, and chefs naturally want to be inspired into cooking what they want to cook and try new things and experiment. So it's this culture that kind of runs counter. And I think like one of the things with country clubs, having, played at a country club in a different point in my life, is like, everybody there is such creatures of habit. Like they play the golf course the exact same way. They set up the golf course. A lot of golf courses, if you look in America over the last, 6 decades, have removed more optionality from their golf course than they've then adding. I think in the last 10, 15 years, we've been in a period of them adding optionality. Whether or not they use it or not is a great question. But like, if you put the back tee on a middle tee box one day, someone's bound to come in and be like, why was the back tee up on this hole?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and handicap in America plays into that. It's like, I've got to post my score, and I've got to play from the same set of tees. It's like, just go out and have fun. Like, fun is good. But it is funny, you change a golf hole and you add a bunker in the fairway, and then somebody comes out and says, well, I'm going to drive it in that bunker every day. Like, that's right where I hit my drive. It's like, then don't hit driver. Do something else. Avoid the bunker. But it's funny to watch people play a golf course after it's reopened when you've made changes, because they've just tried to play it the way they always did, and the golf course isn't reacting the same way, and that can be frustrating for some people.
I think one of the things that's happened, I don't know if this is just my, I just feel like one of the things that's happened over the last couple of years is that golf courses have been more and more, it's just like drivers okay almost everywhere. And I think like I play a lot different golf courses now than I played when I was but I just think that in a way we've gotten away from, I think part of this is like balancing fun factor. Like people think, oh, it's like we have to be able to hit driver everywhere. It's fun. And I think a lot of this is destination golf getting wider, friendlier, which I think overall is a good thing. But I do think like the idea of like holes that you might hit a 3-iron have become like this like black sheep. It's like, oh, I can't hit driver. Like this isn't fun. But like I do, like when I think about like putting together a round of golf and managing a golf course, like sometimes like holes where you have to hit a 3-iron, it's okay, I don't know if it's just it could be me personally too, just being aggressive because I don't like care what I shoot anymore. Could be that too. But I do feel like it's become such a, like with new golf courses, and the general trend is like the hole, you almost have to be able to hit driver on a hole. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah, the National's a great. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, architecture has trended towards big, wide fairways, lots of space. Find your ball, keep moving. Angles, theoretically. The National's a great example. There are a handful of holes at National where it's like, if you want to hit it more than 280, the fairway stops here. If you want to hit it further than this, you got to go over there instead to that offset fairway. You got a terrible line in from over there. We tried to do some of that at Old Barnwell. Like, you can hit driver if you want. Like, there's fairway out here for you to hit driver, but we're going to shove you to a place where you don't want to be coming in from and make your second shot that much harder. And National has a handful of holes that do that so well that, the fairway just ends. The ninth at Muirfield is a great example of that too. There's bunkers up the left and that broken ground. It's like, your direct line to the hole ends right here, and it's a distance where you're still a long way from the green. If you want to get closer to the green, you can try and squeeze it up there, but you may not like where you end up. So yeah, I think you're right. I don't think golfers like it when you just cut them off and there's no place to hit driver. But I don't know that this is a bad thing. I mean,
I think it's hard
to add tees on every hole.
Yeah, and I think if you don't do that, it's hard to get longer irons at a reasonable yardage on like a smaller parcel of land. Like how else are you going to get a 7-iron, 6-iron into a long hitter's hand other than cutting off the fairway? Yeah,
if there's a 470-yard par 4, you're not hitting 5-irons into those holes today.
No,
which
is kind of insane.
Yeah,
I played one
people hate long par 3s. They tend to hate long par 3s too. Like when you force good players to hit, a long club into a par 3, they seem to hate that too. So you can't win because that's really the only place to force somebody to hit a long club is a 290-yard par 3. But nobody likes that.
I played one of the courses I grew up playing this fall, and they built a new back tee on one of the holes, and it's like 30 yards back of where the old back tee used to be. And I hit driver and I hit a really good tee shot. And it was amazing because I got to it and I was like, oh, this is like where I used to hit approach shots in when I was in high school.
Probably not the same club anymore.
Yeah, but it was wild to me because it's like, this is a hole. It was like 450 hole. Now it's like 480. The 450 hole had become just driver wedge, which is wild. Wow. It's insane. Mm-hmm. And it used to be like a good drive. There was like a little rise at 250 at 200 out from the green, so 250. When I was in high school, I mean, like that was like a good carry. Like if you didn't hit it good, you didn't carry the rise, so you wouldn't get the bounce. And it's like, you know what? Like now that it's back, it's like kind of intact, but still at 480 for a really long hitter. I just played recently with a kid in high school who's 16, who like flew it 15 yards past me, and I'm like, oh. I mean, he's never going to think about like 480 is just driver wedge. It's utterly nuts. I don't understand. Like for a constrained property, an old school golf course, like what. Where can you go when you only have 150 acres? Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think there's something I mean, the satisfaction of hitting a great 4-iron is totally different than the satisfaction of hitting a great 7-iron. But how often do you have that opportunity? You don't get to hit great 4-irons because you hit it too far.
I know you don't watch a ton of pro golf. Do you remember Rory McIlroy's 2-iron into 18 at the Scottish Open a couple of years ago? Because it was playing into like the 30. I mean, like that shot, I will never forget that shot. Yeah. If it was a wedge, I would have forgotten it by now, or if it was an 8-iron or a 7-iron even. But that was just extraordinary. And I think like the same thing for a player, like the shots you remember the most are generally the extraordinary shots, and they usually aren't with 7-irons. They're usually with like 4-irons or hitting an amazing recovery shot around the greens, or those are the shots I tend to find myself remembering the most.
Yeah, you give great players 7-irons and they're hitting it inside 10 feet 3 times out of 10. They're accustomed to great shots.
Now you're gonna get the
that's a
stats
loose
boy.
Steiner stat. That's official.
You're gonna get the stat boys coming at you. You gave cold. You have to speak in vagary, or else they will weaponize their stats in any way to get you.
Well, in any case,
they're really good at hitting 7 irons relatively close to the hole. But
I love watching the old Shells matches where guys are running 4 woods on the greens.
Like that you don't see anymore, and that was fun to watch.
I mean, for golf architecture to, and this is so true for like 90% of golfers, is your construction of greens extends well beyond the green because it goes into the approaches for those running shots. That is all thought of. I mean, what is it? Is it about 20 yards and in for most holes?
Yeah, that is still the way a lot of people play.
Yes.
Yeah, and especially a lot of ladies. I mean, watching the women's tours, the trajectory is totally different.
Completely.
And it's more relatable and it's more fun to watch because angles still do matter for them a little bit, or it doesn't on the tour. But yeah, it's certainly, depending on what kind of hole you're building, it's the 20, 30, 40 yards short of the green, and then everything around the green that you're spending a lot of time thinking about too.
This is a complete off the top of your head. I'm curious. The women's open is going to like extraordinary places, but they're mostly men's open sites. What's one course? Understanding like 6,500 yards is fine, is great for women's golf. I think Lancaster was a great example of a golf course that would never host a men's event that shined last year. What's one golf course in America you'd love to see host a women's tournament?
Besides Cypress Point?
Besides Cypress,
that's the easy answer.
No, you got to go a little. Give us something. Give us something. Give us like your favorite. Give us an indie rock. Don't give us the Rolling Stones here.
Yeah, it's all the easy. It's Pine Valley, the National. All those are too easy because they should be going to those places because they can.
Amazing.
Yeah, they can play all those places without having to change the golf course. It would be so much fun. And they're starting to take advantage of that, I think, finally.
Maybe. I don't think so. I don't think the LPGA, I think the best women's product would be if you reworked it and said we're only going to host we're going to do 12 events a year at the premier golf courses in the world and try and pitch it that way. Mm-hmm. I think you could get a unbelievable product because you could actually have the footprints match up.
Yeah, I mean, 97% of the top 50 golf courses in the world don't work for the men anymore.
Yeah.
They almost all work for the ladies. Sunningdale, St. George's Hill, Royal Melbourne, Kingston Heath. They'd all be fantastic. It would be fun to watch them go around those golf courses.
One off the radar one. Give us something from the archives here,
See, you're putting me on the spot. Country Club of Scranton. How about that?
There you go. Walter Travis. Why would it be fun?
Because it's a wild set of greens where you need to think about where you're going to land the ball. And there are a bunch of greens there where you can't land your ball on the putting surface and feel comfortable. So you've got to run balls onto greens, and I think it'd be a blast to watch that.
It's kind of
their short game. Their short game shots are so fun to watch too, because they play at a different trajectory, and they're so good at the shots I love to watch.
The topography would be great there too, because it's a fairly severe piece of land, right? It's got kind of heaving movement, right?
Yep. Yeah.
All time regret was I went to a buddy's wedding in Scranton and didn't stop there. It's how many times are you going to find yourself with a weekend in Scranton? But I was with my wife. And she doesn't play golf, and she didn't know anybody at the wedding.
That's probably before you were a big deal too. You could just make that happen. Now you're a celebrity, but might have been tougher back then.
I should have gone.
You'll get back. It's not going anywhere. You got too many places to see.
Way too many. Too little time. Brian, thank you for coming on. It's always fun to talk golf courses with you. And
thanks for having me.
Look forward to seeing some of your new work this year. Silver Spring, maybe getting out there this year.
Anytime.
All right. Big thanks for listening to another edition of the Fried Egg Podcast. I head to Scotland this week. I will be in Scotland. We'll have an episode next week with Garrett Morrison. We're going to dive into a couple topics, and I'll be abroad. But we will be back next week. And big thanks to PJ Clark for producing, editing, and getting this podcast out to the world. Thanks, PJ.